Hi, everyone. My name is Brooke Newberry, and I am the collaborative consultant for Winding Rivers Library System in Western Wisconsin. And I currently serve as a consultant for 34 member libraries. But before this, my position was the early literacy librarian in La Crosse, Wisconsin for 5 years. And during my time as the early literacy librarian, I did everything from managing our play area to story times for all ages to all of our outreaches to daycares. And today I'm going to talk about 5 things that I wish I knew about working with our youngest library patrons when I graduated. So, number one is that library service to children starts with birth. I think something that happens often is people focus specifically on preschool age children. And this age range gets a lot of attention, and library service to them is very important, of course. But what about those younger children? They need things to do too. So, providing library services like story time to children starting with birth is so important. There are so many studies out there that tell us that 85% of the brain is developed by age 3. And I think libraries are doing a huge disservice to our community if we don't offer anything for this under 3 crowd. Having babies is expensive. Living is expensive. Caregivers of very young children are often looking for free things to do, and they're usually trying to make new friends along the way. Because becoming a caregiver is a huge life adjustment. So, in my experience, if you get people into the library when their child is very young, they stay with you as a lifelong patron. Now, number 2, things I wish I knew about story time before I actually had to do story times. The biggest one is that your story time is going to look different than everyone else's, and that's okay. When you first get into actual library work, it's natural to look to what others are doing and to try to mimic them. I did this with my first job, and I failed miserably at it. My boss had very quiet and reserved story times where she would read these elaborate books with these really detailed illustrations, and she would talk in this really beautiful, quiet voice. And the children were just rapt with attention, and they would pay such close attention to everything she was saying. And so I thought, oh, well, that's what I'll do. And so I did. But it didn't work. My room would be total chaos by the end of story time, and nobody would listen to my really long, detailed books. And I struggled. I did not enjoy story time at first because I thought, oh my gosh, this is just not for me. But then I really thought about it and why was it not working for me? And I realized that I was trying to force something that wasn't natural. So I changed my storytime style and I became loud. And the books I picked were really silly books. And the songs I would sing would be full body songs like Hokey Pokey. And my story times became so fun. I absolutely love them. They were my favorite thing I did in my position. So try to find your storytime style, and it's okay to experiment with different ones. One of the things I wish I had done in grad school is go to other people's story times and observe them. Librarians love it when you come and watch them. Just let them know that you're here to observe and go watch them so you can see a variety of different styles. That way, you have kind of a library to look back on when you become a storyteller. Also, library story times do not have to be 30 minutes long. I feel like there's this unwritten rule that all story times must be 30 minutes no matter what. And that's not true. If you stop a story time before 30 minutes, that's okay. If you have a story time that you know is only going to be 15 or 20 minutes, that's okay too. The library police are not going to come and find you. We actually know that 30 minutes is way too long for a toddler or a baby story time developmentally. They don't have the attention span for that. Now, for preschoolers, 30 minutes is fine because developmentally they can handle that. But even with preschoolers, if they're having one of those days and after 20 minutes you think, we're done, that's okay. You're allowed to stop. My biggest tip is to incorporate playtime at the end of story times. This is going to give caregivers a chance to chat with one another. It's going to give you a chance to make those bonds and connections with those caregivers and little ones. And more importantly, you're going to be able to remind caregivers that they should be playing with their little ones every day. Because playing with a young child, especially an infant, is kind of strange, and it can be really awkward if you've never done it before. Because with infants, especially, they don't respond, right? They're kind of just little blobs. But we know that in those early days, everything you do is so important to brain development, and singing and talking to your baby is one of the best things you can do as a caregiver. So, we have amazing opportunity as librarians to model this for caregivers. My third tip is to slow down. Anytime you are working with toddlers or younger children, slow down. Slow down your speech, slow down your questions, and slow down your response time. There is so much happening in a young child's brain, and this means that they need some additional time to respond, which leads us into number 4, which is learn everything you can about brain development in young children. When you get a basic understanding of brain development, your programs and services is going to reflect this. So one of the most important things I can tell you about is that there's this thing called a synapse, which is a structure that permits a neuron to pass an electrical or chemical signal to another neuron or to the correct cell. So a much easier way to think of it as is that you're creating a connection or a pathway or a road. So each time you ask a baby to wave hi, its brain creates this pathway from one part of its brain to the appropriate spot, so the baby begins to wave hello. And a baby's brain is making 700 to 1,000 of these connections every single second. The mind is incredible during this time of life. However, it turns out that that is actually way too many connections for our brain. And so this makes the response time a little bit slower than we would expect from older children or adults. And another way to translate this for caregivers is to talk about waving goodbye. Caregivers know their little ones can do it. And they will say, "Hey, oh, we learned this new trick. Can you wave bye-bye?" And the baby does nothing. So they say, "Oh, wave bye-bye." "Oh, no, I know you can. Come on, wave bye-bye. Wave." And finally, eventually, they give up and they start walking away. And almost always, right before they leave that room and they hit that door, the baby waves. And they're not doing it out of spite, right? It's because their brain finally caught up to the command that was being given. So each time the command, wave bye bye, was repeated, the brain was kind of resetting itself. So give babies and toddlers time to respond to you. Slow down your story times and be patient in waiting for a response. And definitely let your caregivers know why you're pausing so long after your questions, because they will always jump in and answer your question about what does the cow say if you don't tell them not to. And number 5 is to find outreach opportunities wherever you can. The biggest reason is that we have a chance to see families that we normally would not in the library. People have a range of reasons for not visiting the library. Everything from they didn't know it was there, to high fines, to not having transportation to get here. And taking the library to someone through programming or book selection is a great way to help them overcome these barriers. Daycares are, of course, the easiest. They already have a captive audience. Going into daycares and doing story times for babies and toddlers and preschoolers is so fun, and it's a great way to introduce providers to a different reading style and new books. In my experience, providers often are reading books from their own childhood or books that they were given by their predecessor. So, a lot of little golden books, which, while they are lovely books, perhaps not the best for group story time. So, showing caregivers new and exciting books is one of my favorite things to do. And number 6, and I know I said I only had 5, but there's just one last one that's very short. If you decide to pursue working in youth services, specifically for ages 0 to 5, you need to read the Every Child Ready to Read binder from cover to cover. You need to watch all of those little movies that come with it too. You can start a reading group if you have a group of friends who you know where you are all going to go into youth services. Read the binder together to make it more fun. And I'm sure your library school probably has one of these versions that you can read for free. And I just can't recommend it enough. It's going to give you the foundational knowledge you need to serve this age group, but more important, as you're about to begin your career, it's going to give you that leg up you need in your youth services interviews. So that's all. There are so many more things to talk about in working with this age group, but those are my top tips. Working with youth, in this age specifically, has provided me with some of my top career moments, and the joy you get in working with youth is indescribable. I'm always happy to chat. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out through email or I'm on Twitter. Have fun with Marge. She's pretty fun.